You're listening to Fear 104 FM, the Bap of Bollywood. My name's Darius and this is my weekend special show called The Dawns of Bengaluru.
The Dawn of Radio!
Every Sunday evening from now to about 8 o'clock, we shift focus away from Bollywood and music and we talk about people who are adding to the beautiful fabric of this amazing city we live in. And today we're speaking to Adhirath Sethi. Now, he's a very, very complicated person, educated in Rishi Valley and Eton and London School of Economics, and he's written, well, actually this is your second book. And let's start right over there, Adhirath, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets. What's this book all about?
Thanks, Darius, and thank you for having me. Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets contains, let's see, so we got scandal, you got some mystery, you got murder, you have romance, you have revenge, and it's all sort of wrapped up into this small colonial hill station in South India, which is just post-independence, so there's this huge British Raj hangover, but at the same time there is also a very rigid caste system, which dictates how society there needs to function and perform. And within this world you have three stories, and the first one is of a Brahmin, a very successful Brahmin lawyer who chooses to defend a non-Brahmin for murder, non-Brahmin who's been accused of murder. And this is very much against the grain of society or what people expect him to do, so that's the first story. The second is of a newlywed who is from a very humble family but is married into an extremely affluent Brahmin family again. And her turmoil is in terms of bringing herself up to what she believes is a level that is worthy of this family that she's married into. So she has this constant internal struggle, and in trying to better herself, as it were, or upskill as you might call it, she ends up going down an extremely dark path. And the third story is actually quite simple. It's about a young doctor who has a very simple ambition. He just wants a good night's sleep. And he can't get this because his downstairs neighbor is an extremely eminent Carnatic singer who wakes him up at 5 in the morning and just does not let him have this one thing that he wants. And his attempt to retaliate is played out in a very hilarious fashion, and in turn takes him down a path which is parts humorous and also parts journey of self-discovery.
And I'm sure very dark, because I've read your first book as well, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of darkness in it. So if you had to describe this book in one sentence?
If I had to describe it in one sentence, I would say it is a psychological suspense. I think that with a murder that sort of takes center stage, but at the same time does not define the entire story.
And the books are out in stores right now. You can get your hands on Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets. We need to come back and talk about how difficult it is to publish. We're going to talk about why so many murders keep happening in all your books. And we'll talk about your entire life. Our guest today on the Dawns of Bengaluru with me, Darius is Adhirath Sethi, and we'll be right back. During the day, he runs and owns a company that makes polymers that are used in nuclear reactors and drones. But by night, he's a writer.
The Dawn of Radio!
Our guest on the Dawns of Bengaluru with me, Darius on Fever 104 FM, is Adhirath Sethi, writer of his recently released book, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets. A very fascinating story, as you were telling me, set in this colonial hill station with a murder and a psychological thriller, but it's still in English. Yeah, and that has to be a bit of a hurdle, right? How difficult is it to get an English book published in India?
Well, I won't lie to you, Darius. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And I don't think it's easy to get an English book, or any book for that matter, published anywhere in the world at this time. It has become an extremely crowded space, not just because a lot of people believe that they can do it and probably do have great stories to tell, but also because at the other end, it's an extremely competitive field from the publisher's point of view. So one is, writing the book is actually an effort, but stage 2 is actually finding someone that believes in it and wants to publish it. And stage 3 is actually taking it from there into the actual bookstores. Now the problem is, for one, especially in India, I think, if you're not well known, if you don't have a name, it's very difficult to bank on. And I know there's, you've got very romanticized stories of people like, say, J.K. Rowling, who had 23 rejections before they were published. And it is inspirational. It's fun to listen to that and think that, okay, even I will get. but there's always the author that has that 24th, 25th, and then 26th rejection, and it just doesn't go anywhere. But the good news is, persistence does help, and there are a lot of smaller publishers who will take a call and will take a chance on a new author because they have maybe the bandwidth to actually read and see a diamond in the rough, as it were. And the other thing is, self-publishing is not as difficult as most people think. Kindle offers you many things. There's many different channels through which you can self-publish. And there have been some, great success stories recently of people who were rejected many times over, self-published, and then went on to have books that sold amazingly and were eventually picked up by larger publishing houses, and they were then allowed to establish their brand as an author.
Well, of course, you had it easier than most because your previous book was extremely successful. Also murders in that book. Let's talk about your childhood. I feel like a psychologist here, but just listening to what your recent book, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets, is all about, we need to know what your childhood was like. Let's talk about that next. Our guest seems like he's had a really happy childhood, educated in Rishi Valley, then Eton in England and London School of Economics, but we're not sure.
The dawn of radio.
Our guest is Adhirath Sethi. My name is Darius. This is P104 FM, the Dawns of Bengaluru. Adhirath, of course, owns and runs his own company that makes polymers, and these polymers are used in everything from nuclear reactors to aeroplanes to drones and stuff. But we're interviewing you, Adhirath, because of your writing skills. And you've just released your recent book, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets, and this book is, you describe as a psychological thriller, and even in the last book there are murders in it. So did you actually have a happy childhood in Rishi Valley and Eton?
Yes, contrary to what the books probably portray, I had an annoyingly happy childhood, and I don't think I even saw a murder until but actually I gotta be honest, I've never actually seen a murder. But it is a very interesting thing I think pop culture does give you enough ammo to sort of extrapolate situations and think the things that people might do. And I think the most drastic thing I think a person can do is actually kill another human being. And so when evaluating situations, when looking at a predicament and trying to position how extreme it can become, I think murder becomes the direction of choice, as it were. So yes, I think both my first book and this book, when you have a murder or when something like that does happen, it's usually the inflection point or the tipping point, as it were, for a lot of things to unravel, because it invariably involves some amount of passion, or it involves some crazy decision that someone has taken, because it is a huge and a drastic decision to actually make. But no, I can safely say that I haven't actually personally been involved in or am currently plotting anything of this kind. They are fun stories, and my wife does get quite worried though.
I would be worried as well, because you haven't smiled at all through the interview until you said that you're not plotting any more murders. And it surprises me when you say more murders. It kind of implies that there's been some past planning. All right, let's come back and talk about your future plans and studying abroad, all coming up next on P104 FM. Okay, unbelievably, our guest, he's studied in Rishi Valley, in Eton, in London School of Economics. He's written books, he's well published. He owns and runs a company that makes polymers for nuclear reactors. But our listener has a very strange question for you.
The dawn of radio.
My name is Darius. This is P104 FM, the Bap of Bollywood. Our guest today is Adhirath Sethi, who's done all the things I just mentioned. But our listener, Preeti, just wants to know about studying abroad. So she's got kids who are shifting from India to London to study, and she wants to know what's it like studying in London as a teenager.
Well, Darius, I was extremely lucky actually to actually get to go to England at the time when I did. Not many kids in India especially get to study in high school abroad.
Just to check over here, you got to Eton on a scholarship, right?
Yes, that's right. And it was a complete fluke, and I applied, and I was just extremely lucky to get a letter saying, yes, we'd like to have you. So I was about 17 at the time. I just dropped everything and left. And I had a wonderful time. I made some extremely good friends. I continue to look back on those years as extremely enjoyable. But coming back to the question, it is a lot of fun. And I don't think, to be honest, school is that much different anymore. I think our Indian education system, at least to a large extent, has in many ways caught up. We do offer the variety and the excitement that comes with that. But I do think that college there is a wonderful experience. And if someone can afford it, and I know that's a big if, because it's very easy to say you should send your kids abroad, but it is a huge financial undertaking. But if it is something that you can accommodate, I think people should actually take the chance. It's a wonderful thing.
And if you had to give Preeti one bit of advice that she should share with her kids before they go abroad, what would that advice be?
Just be as Indian as you can, and it will, if not amuse people, at least set you apart and make you stand out in the crowd, I think.
Be as Indian as you can. All right, we'll be back with Adhirath Sethi to talk about the book he's just released this week, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets, up next on Fever 104 FM. My name is Darius and this is my weekend show, The Dawns of Bengaluru. Our guest this week is Adhirath Sethi.
The Dawn of Radio.
Adhirath is an old Bangalorean but studied in Rishi Valley, went to England, studied in Eton, London School of Economics, had this high-paying job. In fact, continues to have a full-time high-paying job. He owns and runs a company that makes polymers for nuclear reactors, amongst other things. But he's also a writer. And he's just released his second book, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets, which is really exciting. It's set in this colonial hill town, and there's a murder, and it's a psychological thriller, and it seems very, very far away from your personal life. So what was your inspiration for this?
Yeah, well, with most stories, I like to start with something that I've heard or that I know of. So as I said, it was 3 stories basically that formed the entire book. And the first one is about a lawyer. So this was actually inspired from my grandmother's grandfather, who was an eminent lawyer in South India many, many years ago. And being a Brahmin, he actually did defend a non-Brahmin for murder. And so that's the only thing that I knew about this story. It was told to me once by my mother. And so I thought that's an interesting place to start. The second story, the one of the newlywed who marries into the affluent family, is again born out of my grandparents' lives. In fact, the book is actually dedicated to my grandparents, partly because so much of the book is stories that I heard through their lives. And it was because they were in a very British company. And there were many stories of young girls who would get married to these executives and be thrown into this world of ballroom dancing and cocktails and bridge, and sometimes just couldn't cope. And there were some dark stories that came out of that. So that was the second story's, the seed that sort of made the second story work. And the third one was really born of my own imagination. I had a music class that was going on next door, and I was just going in my head thinking, what are the ways that I can actually retaliate? And the way that the character actually chooses to retaliate in the book is very much what I thought would be the most immature and childish thing that someone could do. And I didn't do it obviously at the time, but it did spring in my mind this thought that would make a compelling start to someone's journey.
Well, you've mentioned compelling, immature, spontaneous decisions to make, and one of our listeners, Venki, wants your advice to help him not make that mistake. Up next on Fear 104 FM. My name is Darius Sethi. This is our weekend special show, The Dawns of Bengaluru. We're almost towards the end of it with our guest today, Adhirath Sethi.
The Dawn of Radio.
We're talking to Adhirath about his latest book, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets. You were just telling us about the inspiration behind the book, set in this mythological hill station from your own imagination, which has psychological thriller, murder, mystery, and some comedy thrown in. It sounds really interesting. But the question I have for you is from a listener called Venki. Venki says he's got a marketing job, he's doing well, but he wants to quit his job and start writing. And since you've done something similar, he wants to know what your advice to him would be.
First thing I would say is don't quit your job right away. I mean, the first thing you realize about writing is that apart from the fact that it needs to be something you're passionate about, which I'm sure you are, it also doesn't quite pay the bills. I think you can count maybe a handful of writers in India that probably don't need to work and just do writing and whatever else comes around it and can actually survive in that way and thrive. But the truth is that it is difficult and you often need to juggle one and the other. So in my own experience, I've got As Darius said, I have a company, so that gave me a little bit of time to sort of step out and say, okay, is there anything else that I can do? I have a family, but ultimately, you have to steal hours, maybe early in the morning or late at night. The last quarter of this book was sitting unfinished for almost 4 months till I realized unless I wake up early and I'm going to do it, it's not going to get finished. So my wife was out of town for about 10 days, and so I said, right, I'm going to wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm going to bash this out. And I did. I woke up at 4 in the morning because I couldn't do 3 in the morning. But I did maybe 3-4 hours of writing every morning for about 2 weeks until I could close the book out. So again, if it's something you really want to do, I think the starting point is just stealing time from other activities and just making it happen. And then once it starts, you can see where it goes from there. But please don't quit your job.
I have to agree with Adhirath over here, Venki. Don't quit your day job. Start writing or start whatever hobby it is on the side and see where it goes before you take a drastic step. Alright, we've got just 2 more questions for you, Adhirath, coming up next on Fever 104 FM. You're listening to Fever 104 FM, the Bop of Bollywood. It's a Sunday evening, so the regular listeners know that it's time for the Dawns of Bengaluru.
The Dawn of Radio.
That's right, this is my show. My name is Darius and our guest today is Adhirath Sethi, who does so many things. I mean, your journey itself has been so incredible, from Rishi Valley to Eton to London School of Economics to being a consultant to your own company to writing. I mean, I can't believe that right now you spend the first half of your day running a company that makes polymers that are used in nuclear reactors around the world, and then at night you sit down and write. So, it sounds really exciting. What are you writing next?
Well, Darius, I've been working on a couple of things. Again, as a writer, I think you have to keep at least 1 or 2 options open, because you may go halfway down a story and realize that it's not going anywhere, and it can be very disillusioning if that's all you have on your plate at that time. So I finished one book on the consulting industry, which is where I worked before this. And it's a complete work of satire. It's a humorous take on an industry that I think many people find very mysterious. And it's the journey of a young management consultant who gets embroiled in corporate espionage. So that was one thing I'm working on. And the other is a book of short stories. Again, as a writer, sometimes things occur to you and they don't quite warrant an entire book. And so what you end up doing is compartmentalizing them and saying, right, maybe I can do a shorter story version of it. And the ideas are still interesting. And so that one is also almost finished. The issue, of course, is that short stories don't really sell that well in India, and people know this. So I'm hoping by the time I publish that, this might already have made me quite famous, and then people might actually buy my subsequent novels.
I believe it's going to happen, and we wish you all the best. We've got one last question for you, Adhirath, coming up next. It's the last question of the show, possibly the most important question. Our guest today on the Dawns of Bengaluru has been telling us about the inspiration behind his latest book called Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets.
The Dawn of Radio.
The author's name and our guest today is Adhirath Sethi. My name is Darius Nawala. This is Fever 104 FM, and of course my weekend show, The Dawns of Bengaluru. It's the end of my show, so if you've just tuned in, you've missed out on Adhirath talking about his life in Rishi Valley, his scholarship to Eton and then London School of Economics, about coming back to Bangalore. And you know, Adhirath, it's truly, I know I've said this before in the interview, but it's pretty incredible to think that you spend the first half of your day owning and running a company that makes polymers literally used in nuclear reactors around the world, and then at night you go back home and you write a book. It's been fantastic chatting with you, and my last question is a standard question we ask all our guests. What's your message for this lovely city we live in?
Well, Darius, I think we in Bangalore take it for granted, but we do live in a city that's full of fairly cool people, and it's very cosmopolitan, and I think people are quite clued into what's going on. And so I hope that this book resonates with the people of Bangalore. I hope that people give it a chance, that if you see it in a bookstore, do pick it up, give it a read. And towards the end of the 200 odd pages that you would plow through, you would find some very interesting twists and surprises, which I hope will give the reader the satisfaction of saying that they were glad for having read this book.
Well, I wish you all the best. Your book, Where the Hills Hide Their Secrets, are out in the market in all the bookstores. You can pick it up over there. All the best to you, Adhirath, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.